Shalom. Call halal Yahweh Bashim Awashai by Hashem Rakah Kodash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS. Salutations to all my fellow laborers, the Akim out there on the four corners of the earth that are doing this work in truth and sincerity, risking their lives and their freedom to do so. To the confusion of face, Akim that are joined into our ranks, the Akwaf that are listening and learning, to all the hopefully elect, Shalom. This is Deuteronomy 30:7. And it reads, Yahweh thy power will put all these curses upon thy enemies and on them that hate thee, which persecute thee.
Piece over at The Week. Ryan Cooper has a really interesting piece over at theweek.com. You'll recall back, I think it was Tuesday this week, I was talking about how middle-aged, middle-class white men are committing suicide and dying from alcoholism and drug addiction at a rate that is causing the death rate for the entire cohort of white men from roughly 35 to 60, or 35 to 54, as I recall, was the age range, is causing their death rate to go up in ways that we haven't seen since the collapse, in any demographic like that, since the collapse of the Soviet Union. For a couple of years there after the collapse of the Soviet Union, similarly, you saw men dying like this for this reason. And it was, because of economic uncertainty. But Ryan, and the thing that I had missed in my analysis of this, I talked about racism. I talked about how, my dad had that white middle class dream, of when he came back from World War II, getting a job in a tool and die shop and getting a home in a suburb with the GI Bill and all these things that most African Americans were blocked from in the 50s. And
because America had...
And my point was, we need to be sure if we're going to...
Because America had institutionalized racism right within the workplace, right in this government, within the police departments, the fire departments, with the unions, and, in certain jobs. All right? Just like that 13th Amendment, which was put in place to keep you in slavery. Because through the 13th Amendment, slavery stayed legal if you become a criminal, which is why laws are set up to criminalize Jacob. And Jacob is put in a position where his opportunity is very, very small, and then Esau makes it really easy for him to get into mischief and wickedness. He sets it up. All right? And then he speaks loftily and wickedly toward that oppression that he places upon you. This is Zechariah 11:5, and it reads, whose possessors slay them and hold themselves not guilty, but they that sell them say, blessed be the Lord, for I am rich, and their own shepherds pity them not. And our own leaders, for the most part, sell out for that Judas purse, man, with teaching that gain is godliness, and that turn the other cheek to your enemy. No, that enemy, your enemy in that scripture is talking about another Israelite. You got Black Hawks flying around Chicago because of the possibility of these riots, because they're trying to get this cop off. He holding themselves not guilty. It got to the point where you could clearly see in the video how he runs through his comrades, through the other cops, gets clear of the cops, draws his gun, and fires 16 shots. The first 2 shots put the boy down, and then he fired 14 shots at his body while he was on the ground, and was reloading the fire again. So instead of using that video, they made a cartoon animated video, which tells a different story. And that's the one that they're trying to use, and that's the one they've been showing to the public, saying that he feared for his life. All right, from a man that was not even a very young man, walking away, wasn't walking toward anyone. All right. And he had a knife. It was a fold-up knife. The knife was folded, and he wasn't wielding it, and he wasn't in a threatening manner. All right? And then when the witnesses on the scene to even identify him as the perp that they were looking for. But what really happened was that this Edomite was so in anger that this nigger was not listening to the police and walking away from them as they were calling him. He got so enraged that he pulled his gun and shot this young man dead, man. All right? Holding himself not guilty.
Put this economy back together, if we're going to change our trade policies, if we're going to bring our factories home, if we're going to put our cities back to work, that we do so in a way that's colorblind, that or to the extent it can be, that is all inclusive. Because by and large, the middle class boom in the 50s, I mean, we were a legally segregated society at that time.
You hear that? Legally segregated. They set up laws for this. Like the Homestead Act. You need to look that up. The redlining, and the FHA operated on a whites-only basis in the first 40 years of operation. So America was set up, and the society and the business was set up to elevate the white male, the so-called white male, who is Esau Edom. Because Tom Hardy here, or Tom Hartman, he's not... his white shirt is not blending in with his skin. All right, if you look at it, the white in his shirt, you can clearly see that his skin is not the same color as that. All right, he's flesh-colored pink. All right, flesh-colored. That reddish pink.
That boom was largely confined to white men about the age who are committing suicide now. Huh. And they're committing suicide because that future that they thought they had, that they grew up with, looking back on their parents, they don't have it.
That's right. It's over.
Brian Cooper says poor white Americans are dying of despair and racism is to blame.
Well, that's a cop-out, but
and
let them speak.
I thought this was fascinating. He says, well, basically, that... poverty isn't, he says, American poverty is increasingly brutal. Male wages in the bottom fifth of the income ladder, for instance, have fallen by over 30% since the late 60s, and inequality has exploded.
So the inequality, all right, was really aimed at Jake to destroy our households, and then what also did it do? It made Jake turn to other sources of income, which really led to, and then Esau furnishes the guns and the drugs, all right? So he could utilize that 13th Amendment. But now it's falling on himself. And here he is setting up programs, to try to keep his people out of jail. They have drug court now for all these drug addicted Edomites who are committing all these crimes. They're committing crimes to furnish their drug habits now. All right? They're committing crimes. But yet they're not getting just locked in jail like they did when the crack hit. Just called a crackhead, you're a criminal and a savage and you just need to be locked up. No, they want to help little Tom Hartman. Get him help. That's not the case with Jacob, though. So as you're seeing, there's a different set of justice in America for the sons of Jacob and for the sons of Esau. And draconianism is being used at the highest in America, man. Where Esau gets the minimum punishment or whatever the crime is, and Jacob gets the maximum punishment for the littlest things. Every day there's a new case somewhere in America where some guy has been exonerated or let out of prison, but he's already spent 5, 10, 15, 30 years of his life in prison for a crime that he did not do, which they knew he didn't do when they locked him up. It's case after case after case after case. But they don't care because it's a business and they're out to protect their interests. Their money-making interests, not about justice. All right, and that's with everything. All right, when your tax laws, when people really understand what's going on with taxes, that people will riot right then and there. All right.
Those in the top 1% capture virtually all economic growth. I mean, if you've ever listened to Bernie Sanders, you know that to be the case. But then it gets really interesting. He says, now, the reason that... So okay, you've got that, and you've got all these white, quote, middle-class men, middle-aged middle-class men who, in a previous generation, right now at this point in their lives, would have been making, in today's dollars, $30,000-$40,000 a year. In some cases, much more than that, $50,000-$60,000 a year. In some cases, and so even $70,000 in some of the more specialized
Hey, $30,000 a year was really good money in the 1930s and in the 1960s and 70s, man. $40,000 and $50,000 was a lot of money. All right, meaning you could live well. Your woman didn't have to work. You typically could. You had a house. You had a couple cars. Sometimes even a boat. You're able to take your family on trips every year, and that's not the case now in America. All right, the generations now are not living like their parents, man. Unless you're the elites, the super wealthy, and the super wealthy Edomites don't give a damn about the working class Edomites, or anyone else for that matter.
Jobs, and now they're laid off. They don't have a job, and the social safety net in America is not strong enough to catch them. Right? Unemployment has been limited to a year in most places. The Republicans 2 years ago refused to extend long-term federal unemployment. It still has, it's still blocked. Welfare is only available for a maximum of 5 years.
They send a lot of money over to the Israelis, though. About $6 billion a year, but they don't take care of Americans. Because guess what? Them Israelis rule America. You best believe. All right? Like Brother Nathaniel says, Jew America.
What, 6 or 7 years into a Great Recession? And he points out that the reason why during the Clinton administration they cut back on welfare, during the Reagan administration they cut back on housing and education assistance,
which made it so rough for Jake. So rough. They already didn't have jobs or couldn't keep jobs. All the jobs were actually starting to leave and go overseas in the late 70s and going into the 80s.
During just basically through this whole thing is that and why universities have become more expensive. They've done away with free education. Their disability insurance, unemployment insurance, all dialed back. No child allowance, no paid vacation, stuff like that. The reason all that stuff has gone away is because historically, the white people who are the majority of the voters voted against it because they believed, this is going back to Reagan's welfare queen thing, they believed that these welfare benefits were going to black people.
And the truth of the matter is, when you look up the statistics, the biggest group of people on welfare in America was the so-called white people. Huffington Post report. You can check it out for yourself. They make up the majority of the people on welfare, and when you add in the Israelis over there in the land of Israel, that gets the biggest chunk of the welfare from America. Yeah, the majority is definitely them, but in their media, like he said, the black welfare queen, which they had broken up their household by giving them all this freedom and this rights and this child support shit, and broke up the families and drove the men out of the houses. Now guess what? It's coming home to roost. It's happening to them. White men can't pay their bills. They can't pay for their houses. They can't pay their child support. They can't pay their alimony. It's happening. The curses are upon them. And what are they doing? They're turning to drugs. They're committing suicide. Drinking themselves to death.
And the white people were saying, we don't want to be paying taxes to be supporting a bunch of black freeloaders. And now the white people are in the position of needing those resources, and they're not there. Which is something African Americans could have told you for a long, long time. Not to mention that the jobs aren't there, which, has been the case for African Americans for a long, long time.
And see, this is just it. Esau will play that role like he cares. This son of a bitch knows that Africa is named after a so-called white man, Scipio Africanus, and he knows that America is named after another white man, Amerigo Vespucci. All right. And that the so-called black person here, so-called, is neither African nor American. All right. The ones that got brought over here on the slave ships were the Israelites. The ones off the west coast of Africa that fled there in 70 AD, fleeing Jerusalem when the Romans sacked Jerusalem. They fled in all directions, but the bulk of them fled into West Africa, the southern kingdom, which made up Benjamin, Judah, and Levi. And there are Negro land maps that go back to 1743 that prove that fact. They had areas. They had forts called Fort Benjamin and Fort Judah, Fort Benjamin and Fort Judah. All right, can't get around these truths, man.
I wanted to update my rant. I thought that was just a fascinating insight and a really worthwhile one. To watch.
Hey, look, let's read this scripture. This is Baruch 4:25, and it says, "My children, suffer patiently the wrath that is come upon you from God, for thine enemy have persecuted thee, but shortly thou shalt see his destruction, and shall tread upon his neck." All right. "My delicate ones have gone rough ways and were taken away as a flock caught of the enemies. Be of good comfort, O my children, and cry unto power, for ye shall be remembered of him that brought these things upon you." So the Lord is going to redeem us. You can see the curses falling upon Tom Hartman and his people. Call halal Yahweh Bashem Abishai, Bahashem, Wakar Kodash, Wa Abba Babal.